Hi guys, Mindstone here, and today we will be looking at Silence Priest. So the deck hasn't had that many new cards from the Knights of the Frozen Throne, but they had a few very notable inclusions, um, which I probably already have talked about. But more so than the actual changes to the deck, the changes to the meta overall has meant that Silence Priest has become a stronger contender in general. So therefore, I think it's a powerful deck, and we should definitely um, give it a try. So first card up is Silence, fitting for the name of the deck and probably think giving it the name, at least the mechanic. So as the name clearly states, it will silence a minion for 0 mana, which is good. So the thing you should note about silence is that often you want to silence your own minions, the ones with the negative effects, but you can actually consider silencing your opponent's minions too. So the thing is often entirely new players are going to think of silence as a negative effect, so you strip something of enhancement, so buffs, but it's not necessarily negative. Slightly more advanced player will see it as a buff to his minions with the negative effects, but that's not entirely true either, because it's not purely that. What silence really is actually a very flexible card for either enabling our minions to perform better by taking off negative effects, or it is a tool for shutting down the enemy minions with especially powerful buffs. So the reason I'd use it shutting down enemy minions would be something like I have to go through a taunt, or um, my opponent played Spike Rigged Steed on a minion, or something like that. So, well, it's flexible, but yeah, you should just care when using the card because it's very powerful and very central for the deck. Next card up being Inner Fire. This card is kind of gimmicky because it's a combo card, but we use it for the occasional one-shots the deck is sort of known for. Because it combos really nicely with these high health minions we've got to make really, really big hitters. Um, so sometimes we're just going to have a big minion that we're just going to buff up with this one to have a lot of attack. At other times we're actually going to buff the minion's health, specifically with other spells, to sort of make it really big and kill our opponent in one turn with this, which is actually happening more often than you'd think. But yeah, that's kind of why it's in there actually. So we are playing two of them. I could actually argue that you could play just one, but I think two is good for consistency, so we're playing two of them. Then we've got Northshire Cleric. This is probably an auto-include in every priest ever, because it's so strong. The stats are fairly good. 1-3 for 1 is good, just in general. And the effect is really, really strong too. Because, well, talking about the way Northshire Cleric's effect behaves is sort of a science in its own right. So there's so many things you can do with this effect, and there's so many factors that well you can play around with when playing it, because playing it on turn one can be a good play sometimes. Sometimes it's not a good play, and at other times you don't want the effect, and sometimes you do want the effect, and it's really really hard to sort of maneuver around Northshire Cleric, which is also something that really um, differentiates average players from really good players. Their ability to play the Northshire Cleric at the correct times, because it's a very very strong card if handled correctly, because it can draw very very many cards very cheaply. So it's definitely a card that has an important role. I often like to play on turn one, unless I know it's not going to get out there and do anything. I usually just play on turn one to enforce a denial, so sort of stop my opponent from developing early tempo. That will often result in me getting a lead on the board, which I can then snowball. So yeah, that's mainly what it's used for. It's one of your primary card draw engines, so you should definitely also make sure you get the cards out of it, or you will run dry, because the deck is quite mana light, so it's not very intense. You're gonna run out of things to play if you just play everything when you can. So then we've got Postum Madness. This card is really really good against aggro, and it enables for occasional one shots. Because what you do is, if you're up against aggro, you can use it just to take something, one of your opponent's minions, and kill one of their other minions with it, essentially killing both minions. That's the dream, right? But if you're up against control, you're still going to do this sometimes, but you might actually keep one. Because occasionally, in one of my games recently, I actually saw, well, I was almost defeated there. I didn't really have any outs, but the Warlock I played against sort of just played a White Walker without no other taunts. So what happened was I played Postum Madness on it, and I buffed it up to 28 health with the various buffs of the deck. And I played Inify on it, and I hit him for 28 and won the game. So Postum Madness sort of gives them an in charge, which is very important because you could actually make these occasional one-shots just go out of nowhere. So the White Walker obviously required a lot of spells to get to 28 health, but something like Doomsayer wouldn't actually require that. And it can be done with just 2 times Divine Spirit. So Postum Madness is very important for the random win conditions of the deck, those that just come out of nowhere. But it's definitely also a card you play to just stop aggro decks from being very, very annoying for you. You don't have any other hard removal, so you might have a little bit of trouble with that. So it's sort of your board clear, actually, more than hard removal. Hard removal is your silence. Well, that corresponds at least. Then we've got Powered Shield. Plus 2 health and draw a card for 1 mana. We'll take it in pretty much every priest deck because it says 1 mana draw a card. That's pretty much what we need. Health is just an additional bonus, which is really good in the deck, but it's not what we played for. We played for the 1 card, which is super important. Obviously, 1 mana draw 1 card is just like thinning your deck, but we actually like that because we're a combo deck. At least I would say this is a combo deck, so that's good for the deck, but the health definitely matters too. Then we've got Ancient Watcher, which is like the first of our negative effect minions. It's sort of funny because it's got it costs only 2 mana and it has really, really big stats. So 4/5 for 2 mana is really insane. But the effect is making it actually not develop any tempo when playing it. It doesn't do anything, and because it simply doesn't affect the board, you don't get any presence from it. But if you then silence it, it suddenly becomes a very big minion very fast. Yes, you will spend 2 cards on doing this, but you will have a very, very big minion very fast. So playing on turn 2 and playing silence on it will just give you 4 or 5 on turn 2, which is going to beat pretty much any other deck in the early game. Also, if you play on turn 2 and play Purifier on it, the next turn, turn 3 is still a fine turn to have a 4/5 able to attack. So that really matters a lot. Yeah. Not much more than that. Really, it's just sort of a bread and butter minion of the deck because it really is what Silence Priest does. You silence these minions and they sort of work for you. Then you got Divine Spirit. Divine Spirit is one of the combo cards of the deck. The deck has a lot of high health minions, so you play Divine Spirit on them and you put Inner Fire on them and you one-shot people. Pretty self-explanatory. Also, Divine Spirit, the more Divine Spirits you have, the better they are, because doubling a minion's health that's already doubled is just even more value, right? So, therefore, we like 2 of them, and we even play other cards to fetch more of them. Yeah. We've got Purify, which is the other silence effect of the deck. This effect is sort of weird, right? Because we like the silence, but it costs a little too much for 2 mana. We can't silence enemy minions with it, so it's actually going to be our main way of silencing our own dudes. But we draw a card too, so it's sort of fine, right? Because we get the draw, but it lacks a little bit of flexibility, which is quite sad. But still, we use it to silence something. Usually, just going to be silencing the Ancient Watcher, or another one of our minions. But actually, we can use it on minions that don't have an effect, like Cabal Talonpriest, and we just get the card, which is sometimes the correct play to do. We don't have to save it always, but we don't have that many silences in this list, so we might want to do that. I've got Radiant Elemental, which is really an important card in the deck, because we have a lot of low-cost spells, and reducing all their cost by 1 makes them a lot more powerful, because the relative decrease in cost is like really, really big. Going from 1 to 0 just means you can play infinitely many more of the same spell during 1 turn. So it makes combos really easy. I think it's been seen previously that you play the guy on turn 2, then on turn 3 you have a 20/20 going face, because the effect is so good for just squeezing out all these buffs which scale with each other. So definitely a powerful card. We'll be using it for a lot of things, but because we have all these low cost spells, it's mainly as a combo enabler. But it is a fine tempo minion too. 2/3 for 2 is fine. We've got Shadow Visions, which is a very essential piece of the deck to fetch more combo pieces. So if we know we need that one crucial silence to have our Ancient Watcher attack, or if we need another Divine Spirit to reach a high enough health total on one of our minions to make it kill the enemy with an inner fire, or if we just need that inner fire for actually making the health turn into attack, then this card is the card that gets us these cards. So there's not terribly many choices, and often actually you're going to be offered the other Shadow Visions from Shadow Visions, which is sort of fine, because that means you can just cycle them around. You don't get anything for it, but you don't get forced to pick a card instantly. So you don't want to do this, but it's a thing you might do sometimes when you don't find the correct card. So that's to be kept in mind. Then we've got Acolyte of Pain, which is another card draw engine. This card is like not mandatory for the deck, but it really helps us draw cards, and we really like that because Northshire Cleric in itself is not really enough, so we need a little bit more. And I feel like Acolyte of Pain is probably the correct card for this because we have some health buffs, which makes it even more powerful. Yeah, and it's just a pretty solid card. We're often going to expect to draw 1 or 2 cards from it. 3 cards is quite unrealistic and might even be too much sometimes, but getting 1 or 2 we're usually just happy with it. You should watch it though, because if you go to 9 or 10 cards, your opponent might just be able to overdraw or you with it. So they hit it several times and you draw to 10 and start having cards destroyed. And if you destroy vital pieces of your combo, like let's say both inner fires, you're actually most likely to just lose the game out of not having the combo pieces you need to win the game. So you should watch out with that one. But next card up, Humongous Bracele is the other big gargantuan of the deck, apart from Ancient Watcher. This one's like severely much bigger, but it also costs more. The attack's actually similar, but it's more the health we care about, because health turns into attack with this deck. Also, playing on turn 3 is super good, because you get so many stats, and then sort of playing additional things on it the next turn to make it attack and give it even more health, just sort of get the deck to snowball out of control very fast. It's also going to be the card we're going to use for big one-shot combos a lot of times, actually, when we don't have to like give them charge with Postum Madness. Yeah. Then we've got Cabal Talon Priest, which is just a super strong minion on curve. So if you have something on turn 2, let's say Radiant Elemental, and you play this one, the Radiant Elemental becomes crazy big because it gets +3 health, and this one is a 3/4 for 3, which is really big. It's super good stats. So the most important thing about it is actually the health buff. You're often going to use it to make big minions even bigger, or keep Acolyte of Pain or Northshire Cleric or Radiant Elemental going, so kind of protect them. But the body in itself also matters very much, because it's a 3/4, and that's actually quite big. So you have to consider that it does a lot for you when you play it. Sometimes you have to play it without getting the buff, and you just have to live with that, because you need to play minions with this deck. It's not like you can just sit and wait. You have to be a little bit proactive to win often. So sometimes you're going to miss the buff, but it's going to be rare, because often you're just going to have something like an Ancient Watcher or a Humongous Razorleaf down on the board, and you can just play on those instead of getting nothing. It's always better to buff your minions than it is to not buff anything, obviously, but sometimes buffing your can't attack minions will result in them not actually getting the buff, because you have to silence them to actually get any value out of them, and thereby they lose the buff. So yeah. The card is very powerful, that's why it's in there. We've got Lyra the Sun Shard, which is sort of an obvious inclusion with all these low-cost spells. It's often actually what makes us win games, is just playing Lyra and our opponent not dealing with it. That just sort of goes out of control very fast, because we just start buffing up Lyra, and Lyra gets us more buffs, or more utility spells, or some sort of things, and we just keep going from there. We just kind of win the game. It's also very powerful with Radiant Elemental. Often you're actually going to see it played on turn 7 with Radiant Elemental, and sort of just snowball from there. So yeah. insanely powerful card, and probably our second most important win condition apart from the Divine Spirit and FI combo. We've got double Bone Mare, which is very, very powerful. So Bone Mares, there's not that many minions in this deck. There's not that many. Well, it's not going to be very consistent to target anything. But the minions that are in the deck are very, very good targets. Cleric's a good target. Ancient Watcher's a good target. Radiant Elemental's a fairly okay target. Acolyte of Pain's a really, really good target. Humongous Razor Leaf is a really good target. Cabal Talon Priest is a decent target. And Lyra, you're never going to get to target Lyra, because if you get to target Lyra, that means Lyra is alive for the previous round, and at that point you already won. Pretty much. You haven't always won, obviously, but most of the time you're just going to win by having Lyra on the board for more than a round. So, yeah, it's pretty much just a really, really strong minion. You get the 5/5 plus the buff, which is like, I've been talking about this in other videos also, how good the card is, and it really is. So, yeah, not much to say. Then, the last card being Shadow Reaper Anduin. This card is probably the biggest addition. Obviously, Bone Mass an addition from Master of the Frozen Throne, but Shadow Reaper Anduin just fits this deck amazingly well. Because, first of all, if you look at all the minions, you will notice that only Bone Mare has more than 4 attack. So it means it's the only minion that you will ever play that will be destroyed by the battle cry. It will not affect you. So it doesn't have a drawback, which is very, very, very powerful. Because it lets you play it much more flexibly. Without having to worry about your own board, obviously. Then the hero power is actually very good, because in case you get behind, you get the armor, right? And then you can start killing your opponent's minions with the hero power. In case you're ahead, you can actually use this to finish your opponent. You have a lot of low-cost things, so you're often going to squeeze 2 or 3 hero powers out in a single turn. It's especially likely that you'll do this if you have Radiant Elemental on the board, because of all the cheap spells you can play, and hero power. So, the most important thing to remember about this hero power is that you always hero power before you play your cards, because you won't get the reset if you hero power after. Then you just miss the resets. You obviously have to calculate with the mana, because the hero power is not free like it would be in Highlander Priest. But it's still very, very powerful hero power, and we're definitely quite fond of the card because of the way it deals with enemy big threats, because we don't have heart removal apart from this. Also, in a recent game, I just cleared 4 big minions with it, and that just sort of won the game out of nowhere, because my opponent just didn't have a way to really refill fast enough to stop me. So, very important card, and probably the reason this deck is pushing to be an even better deck than it was in Ongoro. Yeah, but that was the cards, so now we will go into an example game. So, we are back, going into the example game for Silence Priest. And we're really hoping for something like Jade Druid, because the deck performed really well against that. But we'll see what we get. But we can only hope, right? I think the deck has pretty consistent performance across the board. So it's not like there are any matchups that are really good, but and Jade Druid, it's pretty good because they don't really have anything that deals with our primary minions. So we can often just be really troublesome for them. It's a little bit bad we got Unify here. We didn't really want that. But Acolyte is really good though. This allows us to cycle, and the Druid usually doesn't have all that many tools for it, except for, well, Wrath and Swipe. So with a little bit of luck, he does not have ramp to push his early game into mid game fast. Please. We just don't want to see ramp right now. That would be really bad. We can still win against it, but it's just worse that way. We will devour this world. Okay, so seeing that is terribly weird, and I have no idea what he's doing. So we actually have to play Ancient Watcher here, because playing Acolyte of Pain would just get it killed and leave a 1/1 there. It would be fine if we had Potion of Madness and could trade the 1/1 into something, but we can't. So that's kind of bad. So now we're hoping that he's going to just accept the trade here, and we can sort of get over with it. Yeah, he will. That's very good. And we will try to see if we can make this acolyte be our primary engine for this game. If we're lucky enough here, or if he's not having anything for it, or chooses to ignore it, we can actually go Divine Spirit Identify on it next turn, which would result in it being a substantial threat as long as he does not have Big Game Hunter. And I would not imagine him to have Big Game Hunter, because he's playing Druid of the Swarm, which is usually not combined with Big Game Hunter. So I'm fairly confident it is the correct play to just go for it and empower this acolyte to start dishing out some damage. Yeah, we can go for combo now, or we can wait. There is quite something to gain from waiting, though. Actually, I decided that I like waiting a little bit better, because that means we can draw into the second inner Divine Spirit, and that would be a lot better, really. So therefore, it is. Going now wasn't really going to help us a lot. So this sort of seemed like a better play. And now we're getting pretty fine things out of him. We don't really care he killed the Cabal Talon Priest. It doesn't really matter to us. And another one of these shouldn't matter either. It's very likely that he is setting up for something similar to called Ultimate Infestation, but we can just sort of deny that by playing this acolyte and saying sort of putting the statement out there that he has to deal with it and he cannot just ignore it, which is very likely that he won't be able to ignore it right now. Even Malfurion and taking double taunts won't help him out here, I think, because we've got Postum Madness to take one of them and silence for the other one. That's not a problem because we just draw a card and it still has 17 health. That one's not a problem because we can either silence or take control of it. Same to that one. I think this is actually not Jade Druid. I think this is mid-range Druid. He would have played Jades by now. So, but yeah, he doesn't really have a way to deal with this because we're not going wide enough spraying plate to do anything. Yeah, we're just gonna beat him a little bit here. Okay, he didn't want to see that. So that was about how the deck plays. It was a really good matchup after all. And he didn't have a very good start. But that is how it is done. I hope you guys enjoyed the gameplay, and I will see you in my next video.